Welcome back. I'm Barry Craig. We live in probably the most youth-oriented culture on earth. But I've always been of the opinion that we can learn much from our elders, especially as I am entered the rank of the elders myself. Quite elderly according to my students and my 15-year-old son, but that's another story. My guest today is Al Knudsen of the RSVP program, and he'll tell you that seniors have an awful lot to offer. Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Now, RSVP means if you're invited to a dinner and you're supposed to say yes or no, but that's not what that stands for.
Typically, that's what it means.
But it stands for?
Retired and Senior Volunteer Program.
It's a national program, is it not?
Yes, it is.
And
yes,
so tell us a little bit about the history of the Paducah program.
The Paducah program was started in 1980, so we've been around 28 years. And basically, what the program does is it takes adult volunteers age 55 and older, and we match them with volunteer opportunities with nonprofit and government agencies in Paducah, McCracken County.
Mm-hmm. So 55 is the
55.
age. So then
so you've got about 10 years before you.
I believe I've crossed the line.
See, that's how you schmooze right there.
Right, exactly. Good job. Yeah, I'll write you a check. Yeah. So that makes me, that's a funny thing about as we age. The first application I got from the AARP, I was insulted. Then I thought, hey, you get some good discounts with this stuff. So typically, typically, what do you all do here in the community?
We have approximately 40 volunteer stations that we provide volunteers for. They range from the McCracken County Senior Citizen Center, Heartland Cares, Hope Unlimited, Salvation Army, St. Vincent de Paul Society, St. Nicholas Free Family Clinic. We do special events like muscular dystrophy, Zach's Hope, and McCracken County 4-H, they sponsor a reality program once a year for middle school students. And
now, what is that, having a student who's just gotten out of middle school?
Well, what they do is they set up these booths and they give the kids money and they say, okay, you have to provide a life and an existence, and it teaches the kids how to do financial planning and budgeting, and so our volunteers work those booths and help teach the kids, okay, what kind of house are you going to buy? You got to have money for clothes and for food and for shelter and things like that. And so it's a great program.
So how does one volunteer for RSVP?
If you're 55, Barry, then you contact our office or you come by and you just fill out a form. Tell us what your interests are, where you might like to volunteer.
And your office is where?
We are in the Paducah Parks building on the second floor. And we have a volunteer coordinator, Teresa Jarrett. She's responsible for matching the volunteers and providing them to the agencies. So she tells the potential volunteer what's available, and they say, okay, I'd like to do that, or no, I'm not interested in that particular thing. And we try to find something that they want to do. We figure since they're willing to donate their time to help the community, they should get to volunteer wherever they want.
Just give us some examples of the kind of volunteers you have. You can name names or not as you wish. Just some of the kind of folks that have come through your door.
Well, the first thing that comes to mind is we have a brand new program that we started with Paducah Day Nursery, which is one of the few or the only, I'm not sure, it might be the only nonprofit daycare in Paducah. And they serve mostly low-income working families. Well, we had this recycling program where we turn in ink cartridges and we get like 20, 40 cents a piece. And so we encouraged some other businesses to help us with this, and we wound up in a month's time collecting $76 worth of cartridges. We cashed that money in and we bought children's books, and then we found volunteers to go over to the day nursery, read to the kids, and then donate the books. So that has turned out to be a great program, and so we're going to keep it going and make it just a year-round thing. Some of the other things we have people who work in the St. Vincent de Paul thrift store. We have people who help at the St. Nicholas Free Family Clinic. We just recently signed on with the local SCORE chapter, which is the business professionals who mentor to small businesses to help them succeed. That's a volunteer program that we've joined. Some of the other ones, we have lots of volunteers at Western Baptist and Lourdes Hospital. And oh my gosh, you know, there's so many, it's hard for me to think of them now. If I wasn't on the spot, I could rattle them
About
off.
how many volunteers do you have?
We have 567 enrolled in the program, and last year we just had our annual volunteer recognition banquet. We found out we had 316 that had recorded hours with us, and they had, in a year's time, 67,938 hours, which when you translate that into a dollar amount, it comes to over $1 million in time donated to Paducah in 1 year.
Well, now, the background of your volunteers, typically from what to what?
Oh my gosh, our youngest is 55, our oldest is 94. We have retired nurses, teachers, homemakers, business professionals. We have a little bit of everything, and it's amazing because, you know, you would ask at the beginning, what does RSVP stand for? Which is a great question because I didn't even know when I got the job. I didn't know anything about the program, and at first I thought, boy, that's just really terrible that nobody knows what this is about. But then when I got to thinking about it, all these volunteers do for the things that they do for this community, 67,000 hours, and people still don't know. And it's because they don't expect anything in return. They don't want any attention for it. They don't want any accolades for it. It's just them giving of their time, their talent, and their ability to help other people. And it's a lost art to that unselfish giving of yourself. Personally, I think it's a lost art.
I'm very curious, the 94-year-old, what
Yes.
does that person do?
She is a pistol. She is, you would never guess she was 94. We actually have two that I'm aware of that are 94. And, you know, I don't pry into their age. I just happen to see it one day. But she works at the McCracken County Senior Center in the dining room. She works the door, taking the donations at lunch and figuring out the money and everything. Another one that we have is at the Jackson House, and she's been a volunteer for 25 years. And so she helps out at the Jackson House with whatever they need in the library or with special events, and she's another one that's just going strong.
Do you give awards to your Volunteer of the Year?
Yes, our recognition this year, we had a Hollywood theme, and so we gave everybody that was a Volunteer of the Year, we gave them an Oscar with an engraved plaque on it. So they loved
terrific.
it. They loved it.
Yeah. Any testimonial? Well, the volunteers themselves obviously enjoy it, or they wouldn't do it. Any stories they've told you, particularly gratifying things they've experienced?
Yes.
Share some of those with us.
Easy answer for that.
Okay, good.
I actually have two. Can I tell two?
Tell
Okay.
as many as you want.
Oh, good. It'll turn into the Al Knudsen show.
That's fine.
I'm kidding. I'd never do that on purpose. Skip Griffin, who is in charge of our line dancing group, the boot scooters that go out to different clubs and
And how old is
organizations.
he?
I think Skip is 71. I think he's 71.
Into line dancing.
Into line dancing.
Okay.
And he's sort of in charge of it. And we have about 10 to 15 line dancers. They went to the Easter Seals Center, not this past Christmas, but the Christmas before. And we bought Skip a Santa suit. And so he dressed up like Santa Claus, and then the other dancers had the hats and everything. So they danced, and then they stopped and they visited with the clients there at Easter Seals. And this one fella came up to Skip and he said, "Don't leave yet, Santa Claus, I'll be right back." And he came back with a piece of paper with 4 things on it that he wanted for Christmas. And Skip went out and bought the 4 things on the list for the guy.
That's terrific.
And the other thing is also involves Easter Seals Adult Services. They were taking dance classes, and my understanding is the teacher started charging $5 per person per lesson, and they couldn't afford to do it. So the boot scooters said, "We'll give the lessons for free." So now Easter Seals Adult Services comes over to the Senior Center the first and third Wednesday of each month, and they get to take dance classes for free, and they love it. We're told that morale is much better, you know, and they just have a blast. And so do the line dancers, the teachers. They have a great time too.
To me, one of the great values of older people are the stories they can tell and the stories they do tell. Do you have any who just, they go and tell stories as part of this?
No, we don't. Not as a volunteer activity. We have people that come in and tell us stories all the time. Of course, before I was RSVP director, I was with Meals on Wheels. And I'll tell people, I got some of the best advice in my life from the people I delivered to.
Well, I'm sure your volunteers learn much from the folks that they serve too.
Exactly.
It's a back and forth.
Exactly. They get as much as they give. And they said the reward is equal to them as it is to the recipient of the time.
You mentioned the middle school part and having a son. He's a freshman in high school, just come out of middle school. That's a very awkward age. And I wondered how the volunteers related to that age group.
We have, well, it happened, the reality store happens in March. And before the thing was even over, I think it's a 2-day event. After the first day, we had some of the volunteers call us, say, I want to do this next year. So
That's impressive.
yes, so they love it. They don't have any problem
Well,
relating
I
to
guess the
kids at
thing,
all.
and I love that title, reality, because again, he's 15 years old, and when I was 15 years old, I didn't have a very good grasp on the world either. But again, going back to money, it's amazing at that age how unrealistic their attitude toward money is. In that, well, my wife and I are both school teachers, so we don't have that kind of money. So, you know, when you buy, why don't you go buy a Cadillac Escalade, Dad? I mean, so
Yeah.
I'm sure they had to experience that with 8th graders. It's
Absolutely. Well, we did a survey. We gave them a questionnaire, 3 questions on it. And one of the questions was, what was the most surprising thing to you about this experience? And the most popular answer was, budgeting is much harder than I thought, or things cost more money than I expected them to. It's like you said, you know, why don't you go out and buy this? It's like, okay, why don't you give me the money and I'll do
Exactly.
it, you
That
know,
was our
so-
response, actually, something like that. Yeah. Well, you personally, what do you get from the program?
Oh my gosh, what do I not get? You know, it's the greatest job in the world. These wonderful people, I get to see them every day. They come in, they visit, they laugh, they talk, they serve the community. They make us very proud. They make us look great. They are the most unselfish, kind, giving people I've ever met. It's humbling to me to see that, because then I realize, you know, I'm not usually like that, which I think a lot of people are that way. I just think society nowadays is geared more towards, well, I don't want to do it. You know, I want to go and do this. I mean, it's just a sign that you're normal, but it's still sad because used to, that was the norm. You helped somebody out and you didn't think anything about it. You just did it. So this program is a wonderful way of keeping that spirit alive, and I get to have all kinds of fun. You know, we throw fundraisers twice a year, so we get to do whatever. I get to do whatever I want, really, with the program.
Talk about some of the other programs. We talked about the reality program. What are some other things that you do that you would like to feature here?
We have an exercise class that our volunteers run, and that's on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays at 10 a.m., and it's upstairs in the Parks building.
Now, what's the street address on that?
1400 H.C. Mathis Drive.
Okay.
Also, we have volunteers that help in the Senior Center dining room, as I said before. We have people that help at the American Red Cross Disaster Services. They might answer phones. Some of them receive training on disaster preparedness. We also have an office in Hickman County. And in Hickman County, they help in the library and the museum. Here in Paducah, we have volunteers at the American Quilt Museum. We have volunteers that help with Crime Stoppers, and Triad, which is a group that helps or works with the police department and the sheriff's department to help prevent crimes against the elderly. And we have about 15 members on that committee. Let's see. Oh my gosh, what else?
You mentioned Heartland Cares.
Heartland Cares.
The AIDS program.
The AIDS program. Hope Unlimited is another one. Family Service Society is another one. It's Salvation Army. I should have a little
Yeah.
cheat sheet.
No,
in front of me.
it's no. Again, it's amazing the number of people, the number of hours that you put into that, and again, I think it's in our society it's very youth oriented,
Yes.
and it's like, well, you get old and you're just supposed to just fade away,
Right.
and do the volunteers talk about that? The fact that we live in such a youth culture, is that maybe part of the motivation? They want to show young people we can still cut the mustard.
I believe that is true. Now, they may not come right out and say that,
Right.
but I don't think they have to say it. I think their actions speak for themselves. As an example, last year when I presented the numbers for the hours, it was 48,815. This past year it went to 67,000. So it was an increase of 19,000 hours of time.
How do you account for that? Just more people, or?
Well, it was actually 35 more volunteers than last year. So there wasn't a huge addition, which actually 35 volunteers is really a good increase. But I think people just become more motivated to help. Now, we had Community Christian Academy came over to the center, and they had a kids volunteer day, I think, or a week. I'm not sure. They were over there for one day. But they placed kids throughout the community to help out. So I think it inspires the youth of America to get involved and help each other out, and do things that maybe you don't get anything from, at least anything externally.
Well, I think too, when kids see old people, they think, well, that's just some old geezer,
Yeah.
running around. And it's amazing. And in my classes, we just finished doing a section on World War II, and I said, you see these old men tooling around Paducah, and number one, they weren't always old, and number two, a lot of them did some incredible things. And I think once kids see and they talk to older people and their life's experiences, a lot of young kids are fascinated by it.
Yeah. It's. I told a group at the center one day. I said, my goal is to make the community aware that this is not just a bunch of people sitting around waiting to die.
That's exactly right.
I mean, they have just as much to give as anybody else. The difference is, along with their talent and their time, they have all this knowledge and life experience. And it gives them an edge that we don't have. And so you can learn so much just by an everyday casual conversation with them. You can learn a great deal. I learn more from the people I work with than from any book I ever read.
Exactly. Yeah. Have you ever thought about tape recording them?
Oh, yeah. I thought about writing a play about them. I mean, because there's just so many funny stories, things that happen, things they say. And I thought, the executive director of the center and I said, man, this would make such a funny play, but some of it we couldn't tell.
Well, what can you tell? I mean, I don't want to give your plot away, but what are some of the funniest things they talk about?
Oh my gosh, let me think for just a minute. That's a tough question because I can't think of it right off the bat.
Well, we'll keep talking. If you can, we can change course and go back and do that, because again, and one of the things too, it seems to me that as one gets older, and I include myself in that, one feels less inhibited. You say what you feel,
right,
and just let it all hang out and let the chips fall. Whereas when you're younger, and I've noticed this with our teenager, he's very careful to not say something that'll make him look silly or whatever. But I said, well, when you get my age, it doesn't matter anymore because I'm an old guy and who cares. Do you sort of see that their inhibitions are?
Oh yeah, some of them. Now there are some that are very reserved,
Well,
but
that's true.
there are some that they're right. They just stepped out of a bandbox. They're ready to go. And
well, you described the 94-year-old as a pistol, and that sets up all sorts of
she's just so lively and active, and just has this great outlook. She's always got a smile on her face, and she's her name is Bernice Schwerin, and she's just wonderful.
Did she grow up in Paducah, or do you know?
I'm not sure.
Yeah.
I don't know. But
well, you think of a 94-year-old person. That person would have lived through the Depression, World War II, I mean, what an incredible walking historical, well, she's a walking history book.
Right.
And I always encourage my students to, if you have a grandparent that's still alive, ask them, what did you do during the war? They're fascinating stories. And I think once kids see that these folks have lived some incredible lives, but again, it's such a youth-oriented culture, and having a teenager, I'm particularly aware of that.
Yeah. I can give you an example. You said what do you makes her so lively? And when I started the job, I said, let's do pictures with Santa Claus for the seniors. We'll have one of our volunteers dress up like Santa, and then we'll let everybody come and get their picture made with Santa Claus. So I told Bernice, I said, okay, it's your turn, Bernice. Come on, come on. She's like, oh, I don't want to. I said, oh, come on. And it's my favorite picture that I've ever, we got pictures all over the office. And it's my favorite picture because Bernice hopped up in his lap, wrapped her arms around his neck. It looked like a kid, and I thought, oh man, here I am saying in the mornings, oh, my back hurts, oh, my knees hurt, the little gripes and complaints that you have. Never hear a word out of her about that. Mm-hmm. If you ask how she's doing, great, doing great. So that, and then we actually had, during that whole Pictures with Santa, we had a lady come up and she said, I'm 75 years old and I've never had my picture made with Santa Claus.
That's cool.
Yeah. It was really cool. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah. I would imagine one of the saddest part of your job is when one of your volunteers dies.
Yes.
How does that affect you?
It affected me a lot more when I delivered Meals on Wheels, because I had the same group of people every day. I saw them at the exact same time, and maybe it was because it was in their home, but I had a fellow who he lived by himself. He lived in this old shack. I mean, it was literally a shack, and I was the only person he ever saw all day, every day. That I was it. And one day I went to see him and to bring him his lunch, and he said, these kids are going to stay here with me today. I said, okay. So at lunch I told my wife, I said, I'm a little worried about him. I said, I think I'm going to go check on him and see if he might need a home health nurse, to come check on him. So we drove out there, and I went in, and he was dead. And so I called the paramedics, and they came, and they said he died within 5 minutes of me walking out the door. And my wife said the kids he was talking to were the angels that came to get him. And I cried for a day and a half. I cried about it, off and on, because I thought, how awful that he died alone. Mm-hmm. But then how great that somebody was there before it happened, that he wasn't just sitting there all day and all night lonesome.
Right.
Right. So it was great. I've had a few of our volunteers pass away. That's naturally, that happens. Mm-hmm. But so far, none of them that I have regular contact with have passed away. When it happens, I'll probably cry like a little baby. Mm-hmm. You get so attached to them, but you can't avoid it. It's going to happen. Well,
it was what sort of brought that question up was I was talking to a man a few weeks ago who deals a lot with people who have diabetes and they're amputees, and he fits them with shoes and artificial limbs. And he said the saddest part of his job was seeing one of his patients die. It's inevitable. They're elderly. And he said that the great part of the job is you help people, but the reverse of that is it's death. It's inevitable. Mm-hmm. But I think we want to stay active if we can. We want to just show the world that we can still do things. Right. And I must say, getting back to that age of 55, it's funny. Well, I guess, have you ever talked about to any of your volunteers, how do they define being a senior citizen? That's a term you hear all the time. What is a senior citizen?
Different people have different definitions of it. Some people think it's 65. Some people think it's 62. That is just a title of the program to me. Mm-hmm. And we've actually had discussions among other RSVP directors about how do we change it to where it includes anybody? What do you call it? So And I've had some people say, I don't like that title. I don't like being called a senior at 55. It's like, well, it's retired and senior.
Mm-hmm.
It should probably be retired or senior, one or the other.
Yeah.
But, and then there's people that don't think a thing in the world about it. They don't even think of themselves as a senior citizen. It's a title. It's just like you're a lawyer, you're a banker. It depends on how you look at it. And most of these people just keep going. They don't let it faze them. You know.
And again, I think it's terrific if you're blessed with good health and you can do this and go on and keeping your mind sharp and having fun. And we only have 2 minutes left, so let's kind of recap this again. If one wanted to be a volunteer, you must
be 55, and you contact our office at 442-8993, and we will get you set up to be an RSVP volunteer, and you can start helping your community.
And you can choose whatever in other words, you're not assigned to a certain area. You just volunteer.
Right. You tell us what you like to do, and we'll find a place for you.
Yeah, yeah. Any funny stories involving interviews? You said, what do you like to do? I mean, do they sound like you like to dance and stuff like that?
You know, not to my knowledge, there haven't. Now, I'd have to ask my volunteer coordinator, Teresa Jarrett, about that, because I'm sure she's heard some funny answers before.
Yeah. Well, now, do you prefer people to have sort of lively personalities, or I mean?
No. They can. Any person who wants to help their community, we're all for it. We're all for it. Any personality, any size, any shape, any race, creed, color, whatever. We'll take them all. Take them all. If I could train a monkey how to do this, I'd do it. Of course, some people think a monkey could do my job.
And I gather from this job has a very high fun factor in it.
Yes, it does. A lot of fun. A lot of fun. A lot of work, but it's always a lot of fun. You know, like at this banquet we had. Great fun. Ton of work.
The Oscars, that's terrific.
The Oscars.
Yeah.
And I got to play with the statues too.
Oh,
So,
that's cool.
you know,
Yeah.
Do your little acceptance speeches and everything.
Well, I always tell my students that whatever career you pursue in life, your job had better have a high fun factor, because if you don't like getting up and going to work, you need to change jobs. And I think it's terrific that you've got that many volunteers, and we're almost out of time. Give us those numbers one more time.
442-8993, or come to our office at 1400 HC Mathis Drive.
And how many volunteers do you have?
567.
And how many hours was it?
67,938.
That's a whole lot of volunteering going on.
It's over $1 million worth of time.
That's terrific.
Yeah.
We're out of time. My guest today was Knudsen of RSVP. I'm Barry Craig. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time.